Cowboys and Elves by T. Martino. Inspired by JRR Tolkien, The Silmarillion. Chapter 1. She came out of the deep woods, and the two Noldor saw her and stood still. They were standing in the middle of a wide meadow surrounded by tall trees. The horse she rode was a red roan. She stopped him, and the old woman scrutinized them, and seeing the elves began to laugh. Tor said to Finn, "How strange is this? An old Atani woman in the mountains, all alone, looking at us like a bowman at a herd of deer. Except now she appears to be laughing at us." The two Eldar exchanged amused but confused glances. These two were the strangest persons that Terry Mika had ever seen. She was a range rider, and she had gotten lost. The trail had simply vanished in front of her. Then the trees and brush had changed to species she had never seen before. She pulled back her coat, revealing a 44 revolver cross-draw on her left hip. She flipped the trigger guard loose. These two people looked to her as if they were out of a movie set, with rich clothes and long curved swords. But, Terry thought, you cannot be too careful in the wilderness. And Terry could see no camera crew. Finn said to Tor, "A weapon, I think. She warns us she is not helpless." The Eldar were tall and young-looking. Finn had fair hair, the color of deep gold. He seemed serious and gentle. Tor was dark and mysterious, with laughing eyes and a wry smile. "I would like to speak to her," said Finn. They stood very still. Terry looked at them curiously, then began laughing again. She laughed in a good-natured, spontaneous way. She asked her horse to walk towards them. They could tell by the way she sat her horse that she had ridden all her life. As she walked up, she looked them each in the eye alternately, a serious and steady gaze, which they gently held. But every now and then she would stifle a chuckle. She was older, maybe 65, with blue jeans, leather armitas, worn in spots, but with long fringe that covered the tops of her stovepipe boots. She wore a red plaid shirt and black felt cowboy hat over graying braids, a wild rag around her throat, a ranch riata tied near the horn of her wade. She was also very dusty. Finn thought, "She is brave. She rides up to us calm and bold." Terry stopped about 10 feet away. Her face went through a few different expressions: skeptical, incredulous, curious, and amused. She softly laughed again, and then, with some trouble, contained her humor. The Eldar stood very still. She swung a leg over and vaulted off, landed a bit awkwardly, perhaps due to the weight of her years, Finn thought. To the eyes of the Eldar, Terry Mika was a strange sight, slender and small, but strong-looking, her face weathered by their standards. She was brown, and her eyes were used to squinting in the sun, but they were dark and bright. How can she be so dusty? The Eldar wondered. She walked up to them. She walked as if she was the most dangerous thing in these mountains. This touched Finn's sympathies for her courage. Tor found it both amusing and incredible, as Atani were mortal and fragile, and this old woman doubly so. It also struck Finn deeply on how the mortality of the Atani must affect them. So bravely, easily, and lightly this old woman must live. She then stood in front of them, squinted up, and laughed. Her pure, sweet amusement at the sight of them was contagious. Finn and Tor softly smiled at her, then at each other, wondering at this strange old woman. "So, boys, what's the deal? Circus or movie or what?" "Megovanen," Finn told her. She looked at him curiously, but each could not understand the other. Tor then cheerfully explained to Finn in a whisper what he thought she was thinking. Indeed, some of her thoughts Tor could feel vaguely in his own mind. She thinks, "Who are these outlandish people? Very tall, dressed outlandishly, on foot, with very long hair and a bizarre language. They are so strange they are comical." Finn smiled at Tor's explanation. Terry took a step closer. Tor and Finn stared gently down at her. She leaned back to look up curiously at Finn's right ear. His ears were pointed. Terry's face wrinkled up in amazement tinged with humor. "Ah," Tor said to Finn softly. "She thinks, his ears are very strange. How odd these two are. What are they doing here?" Terry walked around them, reaching carefully out, and felt the fabric of Finn's cloak. Finn slowly turned his head to glance down at her. How beautiful his clothes are, but they are very odd. My own clothes are worn and extremely dusty. Terry then looked up at Tor. She grinned at him and shook her head, and again laughed softly. I am sorry, but you boys are too much. Are we playing Robin Hood out here, or what? Tor chuckled and said softly to Finn, and this dark person is the oddest thing I've ever seen. He is so strange he makes me laugh. No, I'm not afraid of them. Why? 2 Noldor warriors I meet in the mountains, and I am alone. I am not afraid, as I am fierce, and I think more than a match for these 2. Instead, I find them amusing. Tor then said to her cheerfully, Yes, we are very strange. But what about you, alone in these mountains full of orcs, and you ride up to us without a care? Orcs, do you know that word? Orcs? Tor watched her expression as she turned her gaze on him. No, you do not. You have never seen orcs or the Eldar before this, and you are very amused, at least by us. She looked at the scabbard of his sword. How odd their weapons are, Tor said to Finn, continuing his translation. Their weapons are not like mine. However, I will fasten my weapon, as I don't think I need it. Terry flipped the trigger guard back on the 44. Then she stood in front of them and put her hands on her hips. A reverse cowboy Peter Pan. What say you, boldness? Tor asked her. Terry looked at him skeptically. Ah, no, you will not say. This is Finn, and I am Tor, and you are... He gestured at her. Terry said nothing, but her expression was of amusement and curiosity. Tor then said to Finn, These 2 are very strange. They're asking me my name, but I'm not telling them because their strangeness makes me speechless with amusement. Tor then turned to her horse. Horse, I am Tor, and this is Finn, and your name is... Roni, Terry stated. Roni. Well met indeed, Roni. Maybe you can tell me your friend's name. Tor leaned down to the horse's mouth and listened carefully. Finn laughed at his friend. Terry leaned in to listen as well, then said to Tor, Terry. Ah, thank you. Terry, Roni, Finn, and Tor. He pointed to each in turn. A dog stepped out from behind Roni. Terry pointed with the back of her hand and added, Joe. Tor and Finn nodded. What are you doing in these mountains alone? Asked Finn softly. You have almost nothing with you. Terry regarded him quizzically. Tor then answered for her. Ah, I travel lightly because I'm living off what I find here, and I am lost, perhaps. However, that does not concern me, lost in a wilderness full of orcs, as I am very cheerful. Finn then said to her, We're going to sit down by these trees and refresh ourselves. Will you join us? Finn mimicked drinking something. He gestured at her to come with them. Then Tor and Finn slowly turned and walked to the forest edge to find a convenient log where they could sit down and get out their satchels. Terry watched them walk away, light on their feet with easy long strides. Tor turned and looked back at her and beckoned. I don't know what these strange folk are doing, and I'm wondering if I should join them. I look into the west and think 2 hours of light left, and I go back to my horse and mount back up because I do not walk when I can ride, even if it's a small space of steps. I dismount, I get out my bag of what I have, and now I will walk over and sit with my strange new friends and laugh now at the Dark One as he's so amusing to me. Tor told her, Yes, indeed, I am amusing. You are easily amused. A very bold, cheerful Atani wandering these mountains laughing at Noldor princes you encounter. I find you very refreshing, but rather confusing. Noldor, Terry said questioningly. Not following you. What language are you speaking, I wonder? Finn smiled at her. Terry studied them closely. There was a brightness about them that was hard to place. The weapons they carried were real, and they were surprised at her presence. The language they spoke was like nothing Terry had ever heard. Not Spanish, which Terry could speak, but it had a trilled R and musical intonations. Their voices were beautiful, but pointed ears? That was very odd. Terry felt a tiny bit of uneasiness being with them.